West Side Story, the 2021 remake of the 1961 original, directed by one of the greatest directors to ever do it, depicting forbidden love, gang conflict, dance, music, and of course, old-time New York City. Was this rendition of West Side Story a necessary remake? Feel free to like and subscribe, and let's find out. In very brief terms, West Side Story told and tells the story of an ethnic white gang, the Jets, in conflict with a gang of recent immigrant Puerto Ricans, the Sharks, battling for turf on the streets of Manhattan's West Side. In the midst of all the chaos, a young man from the white side and a young lady from the Hispanic side
You're not Puerto Rican.
Is that okay?
happen to fall in love with one another. Obviously inspired by Romeo and Juliet, West Side Story, in the end, is a romantic tragedy of young love, caught up in opposing clans via the form of an urban musical. The original movie was an early 60s classic with lasting cultural impact.
Come on, brother.
So much so that when it was announced Spielberg was remaking it, one could not help but be comfortably unsurprised. The new version brings Hispanic actors to Hispanic roles, rather than white actors with fake tan and black hair dye.
You too, Anita.
More updated grit and more acrobatic dance scenes. In fairness, the casting was excellent overall, but I have to say I'm undecided about the two main leads, Tony and Maria,
You just figuring that out?
who were good but fell short of epic. Steven Spielberg, one of the greatest directors of the modern era, in the twilight of his career, has made a passion project of an epic cult classic. If you love or even like the medium of cinema, then you'll appreciate this filmic love letter to a classic. Initially conceived way back in the 1940s as a musical urban version of Romeo and Juliet entitled East Side Story, it wasn't until the 1950s that West Side Story went into production as a 1957 Broadway musical. Due to its success, West Side Story was adapted into the 1961 film, starring Natalie Wood, and with that, Western pop cultural history was made. Okay, so let's really try and break down the history. West Side Story tells the story of people dating outside of their ethnic group, and it tells the story of rival gangs, and it brings it together, as well as the musical dimension, as well as people fighting whilst dancing, hence knife fights and From a cultural impact perspective, how can I break this down to you? You've got Jungle Fever, the Italian girl from Bensonhurst going out with the black guy from Harlem.
Bensonhurst.
Harlem.
It's beautiful.
You have Saturday Night Fever with John Travolta. You have the Italian side in the dance competition facing off against the Puerto Ricans on the other side.
Here now we have couple number 15. The Puerto Rican, aquí tenemos a Maria. Whole neighborhood, huh?
That's already in the 70s influenced by the original West Side Story. What I'm trying to say here is that West Side Story is kind of like the first modern movie of its time, which tells post-World War II story of immigration, post-World War II story of gang culture, post-World War II story of white flight. From me growing up, I grew up watching TV shows like Grange Hill. You had Grange Hill versus St. Joe's. They were going to rumble.
So you turned up then? Yeah, what do you think we do? Chicken out?
Justine from Grange Hill was dating a dude from St. Joe's.
All the gangs round here, the Eagles and the Orcs. I'd be really upset if he was involved in all that.
They were going to have a big rumble, but that girl Chrissy comes in and does the sanctimonious speech.
I'll take you one-on-one, or a lot of us will take you.
Wait just 1 minute, okay? I want my baby to have a good view of this.
Just like in West Side Story.
All of you! You all killed him with hate!
Clearly, West Side Story influenced the hell out of someone in the BBC. Boomers grew up with it, but my generation grew up watching things that were clearly inspired by it. The first World Cup I ever watched in '94, what was the theme tune? Someone in the BBC must love West Side Story. You gotta love the BBC.
Emily likes the BBC. Oh my God.
BBC!
If you've ever seen the movie Babylon, the early 80s movie Babylon, there is the ethnic tension of white Cockneys versus West Indians in New Cross, southeast London. There's some kind of post-West Side Story inspirational components in the film Babylon. Of my generation, I saw the early 90s episodes of Grange Hill before I saw West Side Story. I saw the World Cup in '94 with the music, I Wanna Be in America, before I saw West Side Story. When I did see West Side Story when I was in the 4th or 5th year of secondary school, my teacher, Mr. Long, he loved it. I was making fun of the music. But I can tell you deep down, I respected the movie. I was laughing at it, but I always liked West Side Story. Another thing aside from that is there's also the West Side component, as in movies that are set in Hell's Kitchen or the West Side in general.
What's your mother doing flapping around in a cage?
You've got Sleepers set in Hell's Kitchen. So Sleepers is after the West Side Story era. These ethnic groups are starting to get on a little bit.
What happens is our business, not yours, okay?
You gotta stay tough to be tough.
The film Sleepers has Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Brad Pitt, but the depiction in it of the West Side Irish, the Hell's Kitchen Irish in Sleepers.
Can I help you with something, Chief?
Not right now. Enjoy the rest of your meal.
That's in the legacy of West Side Story, which has got kind of post-World War II, blue-collar, tough white dudes.
We fought hard for this turf and we ain't just gonna give it up.
Sleepers is a classic anyway, but specifically that Irish West Side component, that's kind of post-West Side Story legacy film. What else have you got? You've got State of Grace, another film about the Westies, who were the West Side Irish crime group. The movie was melancholic and depressing. But again, Hollywood seems to love Hell's Kitchen in the West Side. It seems to love Irish toughs or white toughs from the West Side.
Some jerk-off kid who insults the world by don't pay him what he owes him for the mere fact of his existence. Frankie, can't you see I'm busy here?
Gary Oldman, Ed Harris as the two brothers, obviously inspired by the real-life Westies. Ed Harris is obviously based on Jimmy Coonan. Gary Oldman's character is obviously based on Mickey Featherstone. Again, post-West Side, but in that milieu of Hollywood loving New York's West Side. So with all of that being said, when they announced Spielberg's making a remake of West Side Story, I'm like, it does kind of make sense. It is Spielberg and he's remaking it, as opposed to the big studios trying to reboot these franchise sci-fi films. It's a super duper classic. This movie has influenced the heck out of Hollywood for like 50, 60, however many years, so why not? If anyone's going to remake it, Steven Spielberg is the man to do it. What I liked about it, well, first of all, it's going to be set on the West Side, Hell's Kitchen / adjacent areas of the West Side, so I was going to like it regardless. The cast was great. The new guy that they casted for Bernardo was very good. Of course, they were going to get Latinos for Latino roles, although they weren't all necessarily Puerto Rican, right? Bernardo was Cuban, so it is an island Hispanic dude. In this era, they had to do that anyway, so it's almost a given. But I always wanted more Puerto Riqueño actors in Puerto Riqueño roles.
Tú eres latino. Sí. They lied to you, man. You're too white, but you're Latino.
That's not woke, that's being accurate. On the woke thing, you had the tomboy character in the original film.
Oh, Riff, you gotta let me in the gang.
But in this film, you're making that wannabe Jets gang member into some kind of LGBTQ one-man army Jean-Claude Van Damme who beats up everyone. Okay, maybe they're injecting the woke dynamic into this film, but not enough to ruin the film. But if you want to talk about woke stuff in the West Side Hell's Kitchen Hollywood genre, if you've seen the movie The Kitchen,
All these men working these streets and not a solid set of balls anywhere.
that is an example where the woke thing, I can't even watch the film. I did not see that in West Side Story because there's so much more to it. The character Rift, the white Jets gang member who didn't want to give up the gang life.
And you know what's left out of all that? The Jets.
Certain scenes with him, when this Tony's falling in love and he's trying to squash the beef, he's trying to reason with Bernardo, and Bernardo's full of Latin machismo, he's not having it, and this Rift is reading the situation like, I admire Tony for wanting a different life, but these lot ain't having it. And he can both, just through facial expressions, he's reading Tony and he's reading Bernardo, and you can see that all through facial acting, no dialogue. That was a brilliant performance from the guy who played Rift. That's what I liked about it. I liked the scale, I liked the time, I liked the way they'd filmed New York at that time period. Beautifully filmed, good musical scenes. That's what I liked about it. What I didn't like, the downside, it felt a bit flat and disengaging throughout, say, the middle. There was something a bit missing from it. I attribute it to the romance component wasn't strong enough to merit all this war, all this beef. In terms of Spielberg doing a romance picture, his forte isn't romance as such. He does films about love, but it's friendship love, it's platonic love. Because if you look at the guy that they casted to play Tony in this version, the young lady that they casted to play Maria, the chemistry was mild at best. The man is a genius, but he doesn't do romance as such. When it's all said and done, West Side Story 2021 was made with love, hence bringing Rita Moreno back.
She was only dancing.
You don't want to start with that.
As a rating, I'm giving it a 7.6. Really, it should have been an 8.4. The best time may have been the 90s. Maybe you wanted to cast J-Lo and Benicio del Toro at that time.
Nobody's asking you, gringo.
Latino.
But that was then. It was made now. 7.6. Solid movie. I will watch it again. It's set on the west side of Manhattan. It's a West Side genre film. If you made it this far, a very big thank you Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.